Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of DC's Legends of Tomorrow. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. First and foremost, the Legends have made it to New York. Yay! / not yay, because obviously going to New York and starting the time machine is what kills them. But regardless, it's so interesting because Gary's like, Legends, we made it to New York. And then he opens the door and they're like, yeah, we know, we heard you. I was like, oh! Like, even though it's a pocket dimension, can they hear him based on the key? Or is it just that he kept, because they were like, yeah, you know, Bayrod's like, yeah, I appreciate the constant updates, Gary. But it's like, was he constantly talking to them inside and they could hear it just because, like, the pocket dimension is more so the key itself. And so that anytime he was saying anything, they could hear it. I wonder, is that how it works? Or is it just like, he'd go by every doorway and be like, hey guys, we're blah, 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 blah. We're this close to New York, yada, 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 so on and so forth. But, obviously, they've got their plans on trying to find Davies. Granted, Sarah wants to be the one to handle it alone, considering, like obviously, like, they're speaking about future stuff, getting back to 2021, and then a guy noticed that they're the Bullet Blondes, and so it's so interesting, because before they were kind of celebrating, like, oh, you know, and I guess it just shows the differences between being in Texas and versus being in New York, where they're like, wait, you're a criminal? Shoot first, ask questions later. Luckily, it was Sarah that got shot. I was like, oh yeah, right. The rapid healing ability, so she was able to walk that off. But because she's the only one that could survive any gunshots without drawing too much attention, I guess, because, like, well, Nate could too, but don't want to take the chance. You know, we have another Hoover type of situation going on here with the bullet reflecting accidentally killing them or killing someone else. So she decides to go on her own. Well, rather, Gary tags along, and they end up running into Dr. Davies, who obviously is played by Matt Ryan. This is because his name had popped up in previous episodes, like, oh, special guest starring. So I don't know if that was just like the credits thing or whether it's just like maybe he made small appearances as, like, maybe they showed his picture early on. I don't think they did, but I think it was just like, you know, like a billing type of situation. Whatever the case may be. I love that. I love the recurring joke throughout the episode, because it is the thing of, like, yes, it's obvious Matt Ryan, but they're like, huh, he looks so familiar. Can't place it, huh? And you have Gary being like, maybe Mick, but with hair? And then you have Sarah being like, oh, no, he looks like a young Stein, if anything else. Which I would think it's funny, because obviously, like, she would know what a young Stein looked like, because they've met young Stein. Well, at least, I think she might be No, I think Nate was around to meet the young Stein. I think that was around. Yeah, so regardless, tangents and all that aside. Or was it? Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was a season 2 or 3 thing. Regardless, once again, tangents and all that aside. I think it's so interesting that, like, you know, it's like, why are they making him play a different character? That I'm like, could he be related to Constantine? Like, could he be like an ancestor for them to look alike, but also to have that bit? Because I'm sure it's going to blow up and it's going to be a bigger and bigger bit. Like, why do you look so familiar? Because even later on, it's like, you know, Zari, at one point, it was like, he looks like Ray. And I love Nate being like, my Ray? No. And it's like, and Sarah's like, no, I was going for a young Stein, but never mind. Doesn't matter. So that's why I'm like, it had to be significant to the point they, you know, get him to play a different character, but also it's like have him look exactly the same. And so it also has the British accent too. So it seems like I'd assume there's some correlation there, but we'll see. I'm guessing they're going to wait till Zari 2.0 pops up, and then, like, that's going to be a thing of her being like, wow, he obviously looks like John. And it was like, either they're going to go, oh, John, that's why he looks so familiar. And other people be like, really? I don't see it. I can see the bit going either way. But obviously they want to get their hands on his plans to make the time machine. And Zari and Bayrod could do it, but it's going to take 5 or 6 years to build it, especially considering the time frame they're in. Because they're also dealing with the Hoover, who the Hoover bot actually believes himself to be the actual Hoover. He doesn't realize that he's a robot. And anytime Zari try to show him, he just assumes, like, oh, like, you're just messing with me. But also, like, they can mute him. But obviously he has his, like, mission objectives. And his mission objective is to, like, basically just live out the life of Hoover. Which is, well, also number 4 on the list is to kill the Legends. It's like, whoa. So someone's sending these robots to kill us and also protect the timeline. Which I love that Nate's like, they're talking about what our job is, literally protecting the timeline. It's like, with an asterisk beside it. Like, you guys have actually kind of screwed up history a lot. Not even just the situations that you've kind of undone. I mean, Barry gets talked about, the fact is, of like, he can't ever fix anything. Like, anytime he tries to attempt to fix it, you know, Jay made the whole cup reference of like, yeah, like, it won't fit right. It's like, I don't think, well, that's what I was about to say. That's kind of hard to say too, because I was about to say, like, well, all that timeline damage has to, like, all that space-time continuum damage has to be wounds on the, well, space-time continuum itself. But it's also like, well, everything kind of got a fresh start because of Crisis on Infinite Earths. But then again, it's like, well, everyone jumped into lives that were already lived until they got memories of the previous timeline and stuff like that. So, like, yeah, like, Sarah didn't know about the previous, like, the timelines of that because she was a Paragon, so her memories were protected until everyone got memories of, like, what the previous timeline was like, and not just the life that they've always, that thing. So it's like, so I don't think necessarily, I think you could still make the argument, because, like, a lot of stuff still played out the same, that damage to the timeline still exists. But I think, I mean, it all stems from Bishop, because, like, well, because it also stems from, we got that in the 100th episode about Gideon being all about preserve, like, her initial factory settings are to preserve the timeline. Bishop wants revenge against the Legends, but also it's about, like, restoring the timeline to perfectly be what it was supposed to be. So that's kind of where it's kind of like a thing of, like, right, the Legends do protect the timeline while also shifting it here and there, while also, you know, they try to make small prints and end up making massive waves. I mean, even those small prints will ripple out, you know, typical time travel stuff. But obviously, because Davies works for, well, it's not Davies, it's Davis. He works for Thomas Edison, but Edison locks him up the moment he finds out about, like, oh, you're trying to build a time machine, you're crazy, and locked him up in, like, a mental hospital, which Sarah had to break him out. But that's because Sarah's desperate to save him, because Barad ended up, like, activating the machine with the piece that they got from Gary, but that in turn ended up making Gary and Ava disappear. And it's like, whoa, where's the rest of us? Why didn't... It's because Davis wasn't the one who did it. It ended up... Because he was the father of time travel, and obviously it's like, without him, like, there would eventually be no Time Bureau, so no Ava, no Gary. So for Sarah, it's like, I've got to do this. And obviously she's, like, you know... Davies doesn't want to listen to her because it's like, oh, you're a liar, you've lied to me before, why should I believe you now? But Sarah kind of went full assassin mode, had a scalpel to his neck, but she's like, all right, I'm sorry. My wife, you know, she's like, oh, I'm still getting used to saying that. She disappeared, so I want to save her. But then it turns out that's why Davis is doing what he's doing too. Is the fact is that there's someone very important to him, and it's like, it makes sense, you know. It's like, of course, love will be the biggest motivation for, you know, makes you think of, like, oh yeah, the time traveler's wife type of situation. I mean, you know, a lot of time travel is done for the sake of, you know, there's actually a kind of a smaller independent movie I was thinking I'd come across recently. It was kind of a romantic comedy that involved time travel. Regardless, it's a, you know, but like, at the heart of a lot of time travel, I think there is, you know, trying to save the person you love. But I love the whole, like, him faking when he had the knife to Sarah's neck. He's like, oh, I'm mad as a hatter, and he's pointing the knife, and you can see Sarah grab his arm at one point in time and put it back towards her, like, no, I gotta keep this up. So, no, just a little thing that I noticed that I was like, oh, like, it's not like a DC thing, or like it's just like, I've noticed this about Katie Lotz. I was like, did you, like, she has a mark on her arm. I don't know what it was. It's red. So I'm like, is that a tattoo or is that like a birthmark? I just noticed it now in this episode. I had to pause while I was watching. I was like, huh, I'd never noticed that before. I don't know if that, it might have been a tattoo, maybe it's a birthmark. Not like it's significant, but it's just like, oh, I have to look into that because I'm curious, because I'm like, oh, do I really have to look into it? I won't, because it's like, who cares? But I just happened to notice it this episode. I don't know if that was something that's always been there and just never noticed. I just happened to see it this time, but obviously, Davies is getting introduced to all these time travelers, so luckily him putting the device in worked, because it brought Ava and Gary back, and it is that thing of like, wait, did I just disappear? It's like, that is kind of interesting being self-aware enough of knowing you disappeared, because I guess like for an instant you kind of feel like you blanked out, and in the moment you came back, like everyone was in different positions and things were a little different. So I'm like, I guess you can like piece together like, wait, what happened? And I love that Ava and Sarah hug, and then Gary got to get on it. He's like, oh, this isn't a group hug? It's like, oh, come on, Gary disappeared too. I get it, your wife disappeared, which I also appreciate Gary being on top of things this episode. He got the donuts for Nate when it came to surprising Zari, and they're whispering back and forth, and she's like, what are you two over there whispering about? And it's just like Gary's like leaning into the whole like, right, talk about, you know, when you get connected to people. And it's like Zari's like, okay, is there did you like sleep with, did you and Gary hook up while I was gone? She's like, I'm not going to be mad, I'm just going to be confused. She's like, I'm just saying, because Nate's almost looking like, why would you assume that, like that anything happened between me and Gary? But it's like, yeah, they end up finally talking about it. It's like, right, I am thinking about Gary. He's wanted me, you know, we should have that conversation about, and she's like, oh, that conversation, the complicated thing of like, right, we haven't really taken that serious step forward, but it is complicated considering the circumstances. But he's thinking like, right, we could live in this pocket dimension, no space and time exists here, so you being here, like we can't split you and Zari 2.0, that way Bayrod stays around and you and me, we could like give this a shot, and she's willing to give it a shot. But Hooverbot is able to kind of see through it, and he's like, oh yeah, like you can lie to him as much as you want to, which I'm wondering is later statements the truth of it, and I guess it is. But basically her concern is like being inside a talisman, like as I said, talisman totem. She enjoys it because it became like her new home, because she's connected with all the previous like ancestors of that totem, like so she's not alone in there. It's become a home of its own because she has like everything related to the everyone related to the totems kind of being there, which is like, you just assume that also includes Maya, which would make that a little awkward. But so obviously, Nate's thinking about, well, we'll probably have to like make it work, me living in the totem, because like he's visited inside the totem, but living there is going to be a different beast altogether. But I'm wondering, is that really what her concern was, or was it something else? Because like for her, it's like, no, I'm moving in together, or like, I don't know. Maybe that was just legitimately her concern of just kind of having like 1 foot in, 1 foot out type of situation. Because it's like, right, she wants to be with Nate, but also it's like this place has become like her new home, and she doesn't want to like leave there. Especially because she feels like she finally has like a family of her, of her own that she's gained with being inside the totem for the past 2 years or so. There's also the whole situation of like reprogramming Hooverbot, which I love, the whole smiles and everything. It's like, cool. And even him opening the door, and it's like, cool, they got the files, but Hooverbot ends up exploding, and then Edison ends up having a heart attack from it. It's like, cool, we just killed Thomas Edison. Cool. We're not supposed to be making waves. We're supposed to be making like small footsteps, and like, cool, we're making massive waves. And then a new Hooverbot pops up along with Edison. They rode in on a Wave Rider, and they have to break that news to not only Sarah but also Ava, because Ava's like, oh, I don't want to know anything. It's like, yeah, we should tell you that Edison's dead. She's like, what? Because a lot of this is a byproduct of Sarah want to go, like, go. And Ava's the one that was like, no, we need to take things slow. But Sarah's like, no, like, she was always being like, we could just take the time, like, do a few missteps here and there. But, like, yeah, we'll get the time machine, then we'll go back and get everything we need to kind of fix everything. It'll be fine. But it's like, her need to rush almost made Ava disappear. And for her, it's like, Ava disappearing, it's like, for her, it's like, in that moment, I felt like, it's just like my entire future disappeared. And then like my safe place like disappeared as well. It's like, oh, you're really sweet. I mean, just, showing like how much Ava has always meant to her, and always continues to mean to her, like what she represents, not just a future, but also a place to be, that you could always like know, like, oh, this, I'm like, because Ava represents home, of like, yeah, I'm coming home, essentially, so there's all of that. So while we're dealing with the time travel shenanigans on that front, we have Astra, Gideon, and Spooner walking, because it's like, cool, at this pace is going to take them about what was it, like a couple, like 2 weeks or something to reach New York. And I love at one point Spooner's just like screaming to the sky, like talking to God. And I love Gideon's like, oh, who are you talking to? Is there someone up there? And she looks up and waves, hi, I'm Gideon. I was like, I love it. I love you so much, human Gideon. You're so good. But Astra decides to like cast a spell on a rock, and she's like, cool, this is going to be the lucky rock. But then like a guy that decides to pick them up, his car breaks down. But then like a guy who's a racer, his name is, or his codename's moniker is Cannonball, which Spooner's all about. Like, I wonder is that like a Texan thing or not? I mean, well, because I think NASCAR is pretty big here, and I'm a North Carolinian. I think it's pretty big here, isn't it? I think because NASCAR is a big Southern thing, sure, but like, I think it's a big thing like specifically in North Carolina. I wonder is that like a big thing in Texas or whatever? Because she's like, oh, I'm into race car. I mean, yeah, it's racing, and so he gives them a ride because it's like Gideon can point them in exactly the right, because he wants to like cut his time from like L.A. to New York, and it's like, cool, everything's coming up us. They run into a cop. Luckily, Astra was able to sweet talk him by being like, yo, like, you don't want to be the guy that like stopped, like, you know, because he's going to be a legend, which I'm like, I'm sure they said that, use that wording on purpose, but it's like, you're going to stop a legend from being written about, which your name could be written about too. And it's like, you'll write about it? It's like, yeah. So that worked out. But then they went for, you know, potty break-in. Guy hijacks the car while Gideon's inside, and I love home dude's like, good luck, ladies, and he's like, I still break my record, and he gets on a bike. I'm like, man, nothing's stopping you, bro. That's some optimism. But it also turns out that Astra lied. There is no good luck. It's just like, it was all a placebo effect, because Spooner was just so down and out. But what happened is like, no, like, you got your hopes up, Gideon was able to convince Cannonball to give us a ride, and I was able to smooth talk. It's like we make our own luck, which is obviously an interesting conversation, because, like, you know, the whole conversation is about making your own destiny, so also making your own luck too. It's very befitting in a case of this show. But as they're racing to get there, luckily Gideon's also racing to get there when she hijacks the car back. Astra ends up summoning lightning to, like, because Spooner just said, like, right, if you take out the power to the entire city, which are like, that's going to have large implications too, wouldn't it? As Gideon's rushing to save everybody at the same time too, and luckily it worked out, because by the time they get there, Gideon's explained it to I was hoping everyone had the moment like, wait, who are you? She's like, it's me, Gideon. But it's like, right, we kind of fast past that. She's just explaining it, and it's like, and that's how we got here. And it's like, cool. Oh, so how'd you save us? And that's when Astra used her lightning, and that's how we got here. I'm like, I love that we have that back to back like that. But I mean, it's like, cool. That's even more for, you know, Sierra too. It's like, man, like, me rushing almost got us killed. But also the thing too, it's like, oh, Davis is alive now, because he's like, yeah, I was supposed to die, so his history's changed too, because Ava was like, yeah, he helped, because the wording in the guide from the Time Bureau was saying that didn't say like he invented time travel. The thought was like, right, he probably used it didn't work and died, and someone else ended up taking credit for it. It seems like, so once again, why someone is all about like, yeah, because you guys make Ripple, and yeah, you kind of change time for the better. But there have been plenty of instances, like one that will always come to mind is like an earlier one is Zari 1.0, when Helen of Troy, she took Helen of Troy to Themyscira at some point in history. Like, that was back in season 3, when like everyone was like reluctant to change the time. Like, they've made exceptions here and there in certain regards, but they try to keep the time. I mean, they need to keep the timeline as similar as possible, because it could affect all that they've done, because it can affect their history and prevent them being in the positions that they're in, you know? So, but luckily, all of the legends are, and everyone's reunited. It's like, it's actually kind of crazy being like, yeah, you're not on a Wave Rider, but you're all here, and it's like, cool, we're gonna, you know, make this work, which I love. Like, you know, it's like, oh, are you okay? And she's like, Gideon's like, oh, I enjoy tight spaces. And you have Gary be like, oh, me too. And I'm like, are we coupling up a lot of people? Because it seemed like, because they, like, you know, Barod gave Astra some alcohol. I was like, oh, don't worry, we got plenty of it. And they kind of like smile at him. I'm like, yeah, they set that up last season, potentially a Berea hard from Code Steel keeps messing me up. Barod and Astra, they set up that kind of potentially last season. So maybe get more budding with that. But then also I was like, are we shipping Gary and Astra, the alien and the former AI turned human, I'd be all about that if that's where we're going with that. That'd be pretty dope. That'd be interesting to see if that's where they. But obviously they're like, right, we're going to go to Tahiti, and I'm like, I had to think for a second because I was like, I'm thinking of Agents of Shield, isn't I? Because like that's the Tahiti project. It's like, oh, Tahiti is such a wonderful place. I'm like, yeah. Tahiti, it's supposed to be like they could go like buy like one of the time bureaus like safe houses and stuff like that, get all that they need. They get ready to time travel just as the other Wave Rider shows up, but sadly it doesn't seem like they ended up in Tahiti. And it's like, oh, very season finale-esque of like, guys, it reminds me of like at the end of season 2, guys, I think we broke time. It was almost like that type of moment, just like, cool, we time traveled and everything worked out, and it's like, nope, we're somewhere else. And I like that, because based on the intro, like, they're going to be like this for a while, stumbling their way through time. I don't think it's going to be like a clear jumping around with the wave ride. It's probably going to be like, because the intro is the way it is, it's probably going to be a while into, maybe like, feels like it's going to be a while into the season before they actually, because they probably don't have like any, well, because the piece they needed to time travel, the piece that like that would have like without it, that's what went wrong. But it was a piece from Hooverbot that let them time travel. So regardless, I'm curious to find out first and foremost where they landed. Obviously, more about Davies, if he is in fact, if what they're going down the route of making him related to Constantine. Who is this person? I'm assuming it's a love of his life type of situation of who he lost, who that person is, just the continued shenanigans we're going to find ourselves in. It's definitely going to be interesting, but at the very least, regardless of whatever comes their way, they're all together, because they're typically not separated for long periods of time, because usually at the end of the episode, like, they're all back on a Wave Rider together. This was like the longest the Legends have been. I mean, it was still like a group kind of off on their own for a little bit. Once again, it's not like that situation. It's like, no, all that stuff in the 20s isn't like copacetic, because you had like at the very least 2 Terminators, Edison and Hoover, being replaced with the Terminator bot. So we'll ultimately have to wait and see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.